The movers will be here Friday, Mom. It's already paid for. My son Nathan said it the way someone might announce a delivery window, calm and final, as if the decision had been made by people far more qualified to run my life than I was. I sat at my kitchen table with both hands around a coffee mug that had belonged to my late husband, Robert, and watched my 3 children move through my house as though I had already left it. Claire stood near the pantry folding cardboard boxes into shape. Melissa, Nathan's wife, held a yellow legal pad against her chest and kept checking items off with a blue pen. Nathan stayed by the counter, avoiding my eyes. Friday? I asked. This Friday. Claire gave me the careful smile people use when they are about to explain something unpleasant to a child. The apartment is ready, Mom. It's a nice senior community. There's a dining room, transportation, activities. You'll have people around. I already have people around, I said. Nobody answered. If you enjoy family betrayal stories, hidden wills, and mothers who finally receive justice, subscribe to EverNest Stories. More powerful stories are coming every day. Outside the window, the October leaves had started collecting along the edge of the driveway. Robert used to rake them every Saturday morning, even when I told him the wind would undo his work by noon. He had been gone almost 3 years, but sometimes this kitchen still felt arranged around his absence. His chair, his coffee mug, the faint scratch on the cabinet where he once dropped a toolbox. Melissa stepped closer and placed a glossy brochure beside me. On the cover, a silver-haired couple smiled beside a fountain. This house is too much for someone your age, she said. Someone your age. I was 71, not invisible. I've lived here for 38 years, I said. I know. Her voice softened, which somehow made it worse. That's why change is hard. Claire began taping one of the boxes. The ripping sound filled the room. Nathan finally looked at me. Mom, we talked about this. You talked about it, I said. I listened. His jaw tightened. We can't keep worrying about you here alone. I glanced at the legal pad in Melissa's hands. And what exactly happens to the house after I leave? The room became strangely still. Claire stopped pulling tape. Melissa lowered her pen. Nathan looked toward the window instead of at me. We'll handle it, he said. That wasn't my question. There are expenses, Melissa added. Taxes, maintenance, insurance. It makes sense to simplify everything. I set Robert's mug down carefully. Who gave you permission to sell my house? Nathan's eyes came back to mine. For the first time that morning, something changed in his face. Not anger. Not guilt. Something closer to surprise that I had asked the right question. Mom, he said quietly, you already did. I stared at him. No, I didn't. Melissa looked down at her notes. Claire suddenly seemed very interested in the box beside her. Nathan opened his mouth, but my phone rang before he could speak. The screen showed a county number I didn't recognize. I answered. Hello. A woman introduced herself as Janice Miller from the county clerk's office. Her voice was professional but careful. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm calling about a property document submitted this week. I need to confirm something directly with you. I looked at Nathan. He had gone completely still. Janice continued. Did you personally sign a property transfer last Tuesday? I watched my son's face while I answered. No. There was a short silence on the line. Then Janice said, Mrs. Whitmore, I think you need to come see this document. I looked at the boxes, the brochure, Melissa's legal pad, and the house my children believed I would leave by Friday. That was the moment Friday stopped being my moving day. 7 months earlier, I would have laughed if anyone had told me my children were quietly reorganizing my life without me. Back then, Nathan still called every Sunday evening. Claire still stopped by with groceries when she was in the neighborhood. Melissa still arrived with that bright, efficient smile and asked if there was anything she could help me with. I thought I was lucky. After Robert died, people warned me that the hardest part would be the silence. They were wrong. The hardest part was learning how quickly concern could become control when it was wrapped in the right words. It started with the gutters. Nathan climbed a ladder one Saturday morning, cleaned them out, and told me I should not be doing things like that anymore. I agreed. I had no interest in climbing 20 feet above the yard at 71. A month later, he offered to help me organize the property tax bills because, as he put it, County paperwork could get confusing. I let him look. Then Melissa suggested setting up automatic payments for the utilities. She said it would be one less thing for me to remember. Claire asked for a spare house key in case I fell or needed help. Every request made sense on its own. That was what made them so easy to accept. I did not see a plan. I saw my family trying to make my life easier. By spring, Melissa knew which drawer held my insurance statements. Nathan knew when my mortgage payment cleared. Even though only a small balance remained. Claire knew the password to the online account where I paid the electric bill, because she had helped me reset it after I locked myself out. None of it felt alarming. Not yet. The first thing that bothered me was how they started speaking about my house when I was sitting right there. Nathan would say the roof probably had 5 good years left. Melissa would mention what homes in my neighborhood were selling for. Claire once stood in the dining room and said the table was too large for me now. I remember looking at her and thinking, too large for what? For eating? For remembering Christmas dinners? For the 37 anniversaries Robert and I celebrated in that room? I said nothing. I had learned that children sometimes speak carelessly around their mothers because they assume forgiveness is automatic. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Melissa came by with a folder and 3 forms. She said they were connected to insurance updates and emergency planning. I was making chicken soup at the stove. The kitchen smelled like thyme and onions. She placed little yellow tabs beside the lines where she wanted my initials. This just helps us handle things if something happens, she said. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and glanced through the pages. Did not sign them. Leave them here, I told her. I will read them tonight. Her smile changed for half a second. They are standard forms, Evelyn. Then they will still be standard after dinner. She laughed, but she took the folder with her when she left. That stayed with me. So did something else I heard 2 weeks later. Melissa was in the hallway speaking on her phone. She thought I was in the backyard. I had only stepped into the laundry room. Her voice was low, but the house was quiet. Once she is out Friday, everything gets easier, she said. I stood beside the dryer with a basket of towels in my arms and listened to the rest of the conversation disappear as she walked toward the front door. At the time, I told myself she must have been talking about someone else. A client. A friend. Some situation that had nothing to do with me. Mothers become experts at explaining away the sentences they do not want to understand. But now, sitting at my kitchen table with Janice Miller's words still echoing in my head, I realized that sentence had not been random at all. Friday had been on their calendar long before it ever appeared on mine. The morning after Janice Miller called, I woke before sunrise and sat alone at the kitchen table with Robert's old estate binder in front of me. I had not opened it in months. The leather cover was worn at the corners, and his handwriting was still on a small white label inside. House. Trust. Taxes. He had always believed important papers deserved simple names. I ran my fingers over the label and remembered the last year of his life, when he had become unusually serious about making sure I understood where everything was. You should never have to ask permission to stay in your own home, he told me once while we were sorting documents in his study. I had teased him for sounding dramatic. He did not laugh. I mean it, Evelyn. If I go first, do not let anyone rush you into signing away the roof over your head because they say they know better. At the time I thought he was talking about strangers, financial advisors, salesmen, maybe even a careless attorney. I never imagined his warning would someday make me think of our children. I opened the binder and started going through it slowly. Property tax statements, insurance records, a copy of Robert's will, bank information, an old appraisal from 6 years earlier. Everything looked familiar until I reached the section where the deed should have been. The plastic sleeve was empty. I checked the next pocket. Empty. I turned back 3 pages and looked again as if paper could hide between pages if I stared long enough. It was not there. Neither was the homestead paperwork Robert had filed years ago. A blue folder was missing too. I remembered it clearly because Robert had labeled it in black marker and kept it behind the binder. That folder held copies of the deed, a trust amendment, and several county documents connected to the house. I went to the filing cabinet beside his old desk. The top drawer opened easily. Tax returns, medical records, warranty papers. The second drawer held utility statements and old insurance policies. The blue folder was gone. I sat down in Robert's chair and looked at the cabinet key hanging from the small brass hook inside the desk. Only 3 other people had ever known where that key was kept. Nathan, because he helped Robert organize records after a hospital stay. Melissa, because she once needed an insurance document while I was out shopping. And Claire, who had used the study several times when she helped me sort through Robert's things after the funeral. I did not accuse anyone, not even in my own mind. Accusations were easy, facts were harder. I needed facts. I picked up my phone and called Martin Hayes. Martin had handled our estate planning for nearly 20 years and had known Robert even longer. His voice became serious the moment I said the county clerk had called about a property transfer. "Did you sign anything recently?" he asked. "No." "Did you give anyone power of attorney?" "No." "Do you still have your original property file?" I looked at the empty place on the shelf. "Part of it is missing." There was a pause. Then Martin said, "Do not confront anyone yet. Bring me whatever documents you still have." I looked toward the hallway. A stack of moving boxes Claire had left behind stood against the wall. On top of them was a roll of packing tape and a black marker. For the first time, they did not look like moving supplies. They looked like a deadline. I closed Robert's binder, slipped it into a canvas tote bag and stood. Before leaving the room, I looked once more at the empty space where the blue folder had been. Robert had spent years making sure I would be protected. Someone had spent months assuming I would never notice the protection disappearing. Martin's office was 12 miles from my house, in a brick building across from the county courthouse, and I drove there with Robert's binder on the passenger seat beside me. I had made that drive many times with my husband, usually for routine things that seemed boring at the time. Updating a will, reviewing insurance, signing tax documents. I would have given anything for boring that morning. Martin was waiting for me in the conference room with his reading glasses already on. He did not waste time with small talk. I handed him the binder and explained everything Janice had told me. He listened without interrupting, then opened his laptop and began searching public records. For several minutes, the only sounds were the clicking of keys and the low hum of the air conditioner. Then he stopped. "Evelyn, have you ever heard of Whitmore Residential Holdings?" I shook my head. "No." He turned the screen toward me. The company had been formed 6 weeks earlier. Nathan was listed as the manager. Melissa was listed as an authorized member. The mailing address belonged to their house. I stared at the screen, reading the same lines twice. Why would they create a company with our family name? I asked. Martin did not answer immediately. He opened another record. Because someone appears to be trying to move your property into it. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I was grateful for that. They gave me something to control. "And Claire?" I asked. Martin clicked through another document. His expression changed slightly. "Her name appears as a witness on one of the supporting forms." That hurt more than I expected. Claire had been the child who called me when she was sick in college. The one who brought me soup after Robert's funeral because she knew I would forget to eat. I looked through the conference room window at people crossing the courthouse steps outside. Life continued with remarkable confidence while mine seemed to be rearranging itself one record at a time. Martin printed several pages and placed them in front of me. Dates, names, filing numbers. No explanations. No excuses. Just facts. Then he called Janice on speakerphone. She confirmed that the county office had flagged the transfer because part of the information did not match older records. She was careful with her words. She did not accuse anyone of wrongdoing. She simply said processing had been paused while they verified the submission. "Mrs. Whitmore," Janice said, "the signature on the document is represented as yours. We need to determine whether you authorized it." "I did not," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Martin thanked her and ended the call. Then he leaned back in his chair. "There is something important you need to understand. Whatever Nathan thinks has happened, the last confirmed deed still shows you as the owner. This new filing has not completed what they appear to believe it completed." I looked at him. "So the house is still mine?" "Yes." I let that sentence settle. For the first time since the boxes appeared in my kitchen, I felt the room inside me become quiet. Not peaceful. Clear. Martin gathered the documents into a folder. We should act quickly. I nodded. How quickly? He glanced at the calendar on his desk. Today is Tuesday. 3 days until Friday. 3 days until the moving truck my children had already paid for was supposed to arrive. 3 days until they expected me to be gone. Martin asked if I wanted him to call Nathan immediately. I thought about Melissa's legal pad, Claire's boxes, Nathan telling me I had already given permission. Then I remembered Robert's warning. Never let anyone rush you. No, I said. Do not call them. Martin studied me for a moment. What are you thinking? I slid the printed records into Robert's binder and closed it carefully. I want to know exactly how far they planned to go before they realized I was paying attention. When I came home from Martin's office, the first thing I did was carry 3 empty boxes up from the basement and set them in the hallway where Nathan would see them. I wanted my children to believe I was doing exactly what they expected. By 4 that afternoon, Melissa arrived with more packing tape and a stack of colored labels. She looked relieved when she saw the boxes. Good, she said. You started. I smiled. A little. She walked through the house making notes while I folded towels at the dining room table. Nathan came by 20 minutes later with coffee for himself and Melissa, but none for me. I noticed that. Not because I wanted coffee, because people reveal themselves in small omissions long before they reveal themselves in large ones. Claire arrived last. She opened the china cabinet and pointed to the serving dishes Robert and I had received for our 25th anniversary. Do you want these in storage, Mom, or should I take them? I looked at her. Which would you prefer? She hesitated, then said, I could use them. Then put your name on the box. Her shoulders relaxed. That was the moment I understood how certain they were. They were already dividing a life they thought I had surrendered. Melissa moved into the living room and placed a bright orange label on Robert's upright piano. Estate sale. I stared at the label for a long second. Robert had saved for that piano when Nathan was 8 because he wanted the children to grow up in a house with music. None of them had practiced for more than a few months, but Robert kept it polished anyway. After he died, I sometimes touched one key just to hear the sound fill the room. That stays, I said. Melissa glanced at me. Evelyn, the apartment will not have room. Then it stays here. But if the house is sold, she stopped herself. Nathan looked up from his phone. Claire became very quiet. I folded another towel. If, I said. Melissa removed the label. Nobody mentioned it again. That evening, after they left, I carried the same 3 boxes into Robert's study and locked the door. I did not pack clothes. I packed records, bank statements, property tax bills, copies of canceled checks, insurance notices, letters from the county, every text message I could print from Nathan, Claire, and Melissa about the house. I found an email Melissa had sent me 4 months earlier asking for a copy of my driver's license because she said the insurance company needed updated identification. I printed that too. I found another message from Nathan asking whether my signature had changed since Robert died, because some banks became picky about verification. At the time I had answered with a joke. Now I read it differently. Near 9 that night, my neighbor Carol Dawson knocked on the back door carrying half a loaf of banana bread. Carol had lived next door for 26 years and knew the difference between my polite smile and my real one. She looked at the boxes in the hallway. Are you actually leaving? She asked. I poured us coffee and told her only that plans had changed. She studied me over the rim of her mug. Evelyn, that is not an answer. I looked toward the dark window above the sink. Nathan had told me the movers were coming Friday. Melissa had already labeled my possessions. Claire had already chosen what she wanted. They were waiting for me to cooperate with a decision I had never made. Someone is leaving, I said. Carol raised an eyebrow, but she did not press. After she went home, I returned to the study and placed the final stack of documents into the 3rd box. On top, I set the copy of Whitmore Residential Holdings that Martin had printed. Then I wrote one word on the lid in black marker. Keep. By Wednesday morning, Martin had found the part of the plan that none of my children had bothered to mention. He called just after 8 while I was standing at the kitchen counter slicing an apple. His voice was measured, which I had learned meant the news was serious. Evelyn, I found correspondence connected to the property filing. I put the knife down. What kind of correspondence? A preliminary listing agreement and financial documents tied to the limited liability company. I sat at the table. Martin explained that Nathan had been trying to use the house as part of a larger financial arrangement. His business had struggled for months, and according to records Martin had located, Nathan was carrying more debt than I knew. The company they created was not simply meant to make managing my property easier. It was designed to place the house under an entity they controlled. Melissa had contacted a real estate agent before anyone told me I was moving. Claire had been promised a share of the proceeds if the property sold. I listened without interrupting. The apple sat untouched on the cutting board. So the apartment was never the point, I said. It appears the apartment was a way to get you out quickly, Martin replied. That sentence hurt because it was so ordinary. No shouting. No dramatic confession. Just a practical explanation of how 3 people I had raised, trusted, and welcomed into my home had reduced me to an obstacle between themselves and a piece of property. Martin told me the listing paperwork described the house as expected to be vacant by Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon. They had already scheduled my absence. I looked around the kitchen. The clock above the stove. Robert's mug beside the sink. The faded pencil marks inside the pantry door where we measured Nathan and Claire as children. Every inch of that house held something they had apparently decided could be converted into dollars. Do you want me to contact them now? Martin asked. No. Evelyn, we have enough to stop this. I know. Then why wait? I watched a squirrel run along the back fence and disappear behind Carol's maple tree. Because I want them to finish explaining themselves without knowing they are explaining anything. Martin was quiet. Then he said, all right. But do not sign anything. Do not hand over keys. Do not leave the property. I understand. That afternoon, Nathan stopped by with a printed schedule. He placed it on the kitchen table like an itinerary for a vacation. Movers at 8. Apartment check-in at 11. Lunch with Claire at 1. He had even written a reminder for me to bring my medication and identification. Very organized, I said. He smiled, relieved by my tone. I knew once you got used to the idea, you would see we were doing the right thing. I folded the paper in half. And the house. He took a breath. We will take care of everything after you are settled. Everything. You do not need to worry about it. I looked at my son and realized that was the sentence he had been counting on for months. You do not need to worry. You do not need to understand. You do not need to decide. I nodded and placed the schedule beside the fruit bowl. Nathan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. This is going to be good for you, Mom. I almost asked him whether he believed that. Instead, I smiled. After he left, I called Martin. Do you still want to confront them? He asked. No, I said. Let them bring the truck. Friday arrived gray and cold, the kind of October morning when the sky seems to hold its breath. I was awake before 6. I made coffee, toasted 1 slice of bread, and sat at the kitchen table while the house remained perfectly still around me. I did not pack a suitcase. I did not put on traveling clothes. I wore navy slacks, a cream sweater, and the pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 40th anniversary. At 7:48, a white moving truck turned into my driveway. I watched it through the front window until the engine stopped. Melissa arrived 3 minutes later carrying her legal pad and a large travel mug. Nathan pulled in behind her. Claire came last. They moved with the confidence of people arriving to complete something already decided. Melissa opened the front door with the spare key I had once given Nathan for emergencies. She stepped inside and smiled when she saw me. You are dressed. Good. I glanced at the clock. I usually am by 8. She did not notice the difference. Nathan entered behind her and looked toward the hallway. Where are your bags? I have not packed them. His expression tightened. Mom, the movers are here. I can see that. Claire came in carrying a roll of labels. She avoided my eyes and immediately began directing the 2 movers toward the living room. Melissa walked ahead of them, pointing at furniture. The dining set goes to storage. The side tables can go. The piano stays for the estate company. I remained beside the kitchen doorway. 1 mover reached Robert's rocking chair near the front window and bent to lift it. Put my husband's chair down, I said. The room went silent. The mover straightened immediately and stepped away. Melissa gave a nervous laugh. Evelyn, we already discussed what would fit in the apartment. No, you discussed it. Nathan exhaled slowly. Mom, please do not make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at him. For whom? Claire lowered the labels in her hand. Nathan glanced toward Melissa, and that small movement told me more than anything he could have said. We have a schedule, he said. The apartment expects you at 11. Then you should call them. Why? Because I am not coming. Melissa's face changed first. Her smile disappeared. Evelyn, this is not the time to become emotional. I almost admired the sentence. It was so carefully designed to turn my refusal into a weakness. I am not emotional, I said. I am at home. Nathan stepped closer. You agreed to this. Show me where. His mouth opened then closed. That was when the door to Robert's study opened. Martin Hayes walked into the hallway carrying a brown folder. Nathan stared at him. Claire went pale. Melissa's legal pad dropped slightly against her side. Martin, Nathan said. What are you doing here? Martin looked at me before answering. Mrs. Whitmore asked me to be present. Melissa recovered first. This is a family matter. It became a legal matter when property documents were filed, Martin said. Nobody moved. Outside, the moving truck idled quietly in the driveway. I walked to the dining table and placed 3 folders beside Robert's old coffee mug. One held the county records. One held the company filings. The third held copies of the messages and paperwork I had collected. Nathan stared at them but did not touch anything. Before anybody moves another chair, I said, we are going to talk about Tuesday. Claire sat down without being asked. Melissa remained standing. Nathan looked toward the front door, as if he suddenly understood that leaving would not erase what was waiting on the table. For the first time all week, nobody told me what was going to happen next. Martin opened the first folder and turned it toward Nathan. Whitmore Residential Holdings was formed 6 weeks ago, he said. You are listed as the manager. Melissa is listed as an authorized member. Nathan looked at the page, then at me. Mom, this sounds worse than it is. I said nothing. Martin opened the second folder. A property transfer was submitted to the county on Tuesday. It represents Evelyn's signature as authorization to transfer this house into that company. Melissa crossed her arms. It was part of the estate planning. Martin looked at her. Mrs. Whitmore did not authorize it. The room became quiet enough that I could hear the moving truck outside. Claire stared down at the table. Martin placed another page beside the first. There is also correspondence with a real estate agent discussing a possible listing once the property became vacant. Nathan rubbed his forehead. We were trying to create options. Options for whom? I asked. He looked at me then. For everyone. Martin continued before Nathan could explain further. He placed the company filing, the preliminary listing agreement, and the county record in a straight line across the table. No raised voice. No accusations. Just dates. 6 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago. Tuesday. Friday. The order told the story better than anger ever could. Claire finally spoke. I did not know all of this. I turned toward her. Your name is on one of the forms. Her face tightened. Melissa said it was paperwork for helping with the house. Melissa looked at her sharply. Do not put this on me. You told me Mom had agreed. Nathan said she had. Nathan pushed his chair back slightly. Stop. All of us were trying to solve a problem. I looked around the table. What problem? Nobody answered. Was I the problem? That is not what I meant, Nathan said. Then explain what you meant. He looked toward Martin then back at me. The house is expensive. You are alone. I have had some business issues. Claire has expenses. We thought there was a way to make the property work for the family instead of sitting here. Sitting here. I glanced toward Robert's rocking chair by the window. 38 years of mortgage payments, repairs, birthdays, Christmas mornings, and Sunday dinners had become something that was simply sitting here. Martin slid one final document toward me. It was the email showing the house expected to be vacant by Friday afternoon. I turned it around so Nathan could see it. When were you going to tell me about the listing? His eyes dropped to the paper. After you were settled. And the company? Silence. And the fact that Claire was supposed to receive part of the proceeds? Claire looked at Nathan. You told her that? Melissa asked. Nathan leaned back and exhaled. The careful unity they had brought into my house that morning began disappearing one sentence at a time. Claire blamed Melissa for pushing the apartment. Melissa said Nathan had promised the paperwork was legal. Nathan insisted he had been trying to protect everyone financially. I listened until they had nothing new to say. Then I picked up my house keys from the table. You keep saying this was for my future, I said. But every document in front of me was prepared without my permission. Nathan leaned forward. Mom, you do not understand what we were trying to do. I closed my hand around the keys. Then explain why you needed my house before you needed my permission. Nobody answered. Martin told the movers that no property would be removed. A few minutes later, I watched the truck pull away from the curb exactly as it had arrived. Empty. The house felt larger after everyone left. Not emptier. Larger. For the first time in months there was room in it for my own decisions again. Martin stayed long enough to help me secure the documents and call a locksmith. By late afternoon, the spare key Nathan had used that morning no longer opened my front door. I changed the code on the garage keypad, updated the alarm contacts, and moved every important paper into a small fireproof safe that only I could access. None of it felt dramatic. It felt overdue. The following Monday, I met Martin at his office and signed new estate documents. We removed the emergency access my children had been given. We added written instructions requiring my direct authorization for any property decision. Martin also prepared formal notices connected to the disputed filing so there would be no confusion about who controlled the house. I read every page before I signed. Robert would have approved of that. Nathan called 6 times that week. I let the first 5 go to voicemail. On the 6th I answered. He sounded tired. Mom, can we talk? You are talking. There was a long pause. I made mistakes. I looked out the kitchen window at the maple leaves collecting along the fence. Yes, I was under pressure. I know. I thought the house could help fix things. Your things. He did not argue. That mattered more than an apology would have. Claire sent me a letter instead of calling. She admitted she had signed a document because Nathan and Melissa told her I had agreed. She said she should have asked me. She was right. I did not erase what happened, but I did not close the door forever either. Trust, I learned, does not return because someone says sorry. It returns in inches. Melissa never apologized directly. She sent a message saying she hoped we could all move forward. I replied with one sentence. Moving forward requires telling the truth about where you have been. Then I stopped explaining myself. The boxes stayed in the hallway for almost 2 weeks. One Saturday, Carol came over with coffee and helped me carry them into the garage. We laughed when she found the brochure for the senior community tucked under a roll of packing tape. Want me to throw this away? She asked. I looked at the smiling couple on the cover. No, I said. Recycle it. Winter came. Then spring. I stayed in the house. I hired someone to clean the gutters. I paid a local service to handle the lawn. I fixed the loose railing by the back steps and finally repainted the guest room a soft blue Robert once said reminded him of Cape Cod. His rocking chair stayed by the living room window. So did the piano. One morning in May, I sat down at it and played 3 uncertain notes before laughing at myself. Carol clapped from the kitchen like I had performed at Carnegie Hall. A month later I booked a road trip through Vermont and Maine, something Robert and I had postponed for years. I did not ask anyone whether it was sensible. Did not ask whether I was too old to drive that far. I simply made the reservation. My children once believed being my mother meant I would always make room for them, even when they stopped making room for me. They confused my patience with permission, my silence with agreement, my love with ownership. I still loved them. That part did not disappear. But love was no longer a blank check. On the morning I left for Maine, I locked the front door, placed my suitcase in the trunk and looked back at the house. It was still mine. More importantly, so was the life waiting beyond it. Subscribe to EverNest Stories for more emotional family betrayal stories, inheritance secrets, and mother's justice. And watch the next story on screen now.